Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a special edition of the Court-Martail podcast, the podcast that is made mostly for professional wrestling and almost entirely for professional wrestling. But today, I'm going to talk about something different. And as many people know, I am a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan. I'm a football fan. That's been long established since we started here at CMP. And it's a day at the time of recording. So I don't know what will have changed between now and when this airs, which will probably be Thursday or Friday. I'm not sure yet. But in any case, I just wanted to... It's the Tuesday after Tampa Bay got smacked by the Dallas Cowboys 31-14 in a playoff game. And I just wanted to talk about what this season was for Tampa Bay, why it ended the way it ended, how it came to be, who's responsible for it, and what does it mean for Tampa in the future. And I know that this is for the wrestling people who come to this podcast purely for wrestling, like Josh again. This is not going to be a podcast that interests them, but sports at large, the NFL is a lot larger than pro wrestling right now. So I wanted to just take a moment to give my thoughts on what I saw this season, and also use this as something of a teaser, because next year Skylar and I on our other channel, Super Jam Session, are going to be doing a little bit more of the football talk. I was going to have Skylar on this, but right now his team is still in the running for a Super Bowl bid, and so I don't really want him talking about his team still in it when my team is no longer in it. We'll save that podcast for another day. The real crux of this whole thing is Tom Brady, but I want to just look at this season as a whole and start by saying, you know, now that we're on the other side of it, I'm glad it's over. I'm honestly just glad this season is over. This wasn't a fun Bucs team to watch. There was not a single game this season of the 18 games that we played where I could say, yeah, I really enjoyed how Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers took care of business, because they really never did. They never, in 18 games, they probably amassed 5 quarters of really good football. Total, across 18 games. The offense was the worst in the NFL. I think ended 25th worst. The worst in rushing. And that's with the greatest player of all time. Even at 45, Tom Brady's still Tom Brady, and Byron Leftwich as offensive coordinator. And I'm not saying that he's the reason. I think he's going to be fired because of how bad the offense was, but that's not the only reason that this team ended up 8-9 with, you know, tripping into the playoffs and then getting beaten by a clearly superior team that was just going to do push-ups on our fallen body. The defense was okay, but it wasn't the defense of 2 years ago when the team won the Super Bowl, or even last year when the team made it to the divisional round and lost in the last 2 seconds practically to the team that would end up winning it all in the Rams. It's nothing about this team was reminiscent of what the team was in 2020 and 2021. And that's really the bottom line of it. And there are a number of reasons for that. The NFL, in very large part, is a momentum game. And it is all about what you can do with the advantages you have at the time. You know, and there was an argument that could have been made that after the Panthers game where they clinched a division in week 17, when they had one more match against the Falcons, that they could have started everybody in that game against the Falcons and won that game to have more momentum going into this one. And that's something I would like to just make a point of saying, that I feel like resting Tom and only playing him for a half when this team really had nothing going for it was not the right choice. I think that team, and Stephen A. kind of mentioned this, and I know that that's a weird thing to end, but Stephen A. mentioned this. There's nothing that says to me in week 18, even though you've clinched this division, yeah, you have nothing to play for, but you do. You do have something to play for. You have to play so that, and win that game against the Falcons so that this team can that the Cowboys can understand that this is not just a joke of a team, but this team was a joke of a team all year. And it started with that opening game against the Cowboys. Yes, 19-3. The defense had a great game, but that I knew then that offense was not going to produce the way it was. It was misses. It was sloppy. And I credited it at the time to week one because it's week one, and there's time to get it together. And then, week two, and this looked the same. And I said, oh, it's early. And then week 5, and then 6 and 7 and 8 and 9. And it got to the point where, we ended up 2-2 after losing to the Packers and the Chiefs consecutively. And all of these games, the scoring was, that game, the Bucs put up 31, but it was long over well before the Bucs started to turn that game on against the Chiefs. And the Chiefs also had something to prove against Tom as well, and against the Bucs after that whole Super Bowl thing. And I think that's it. It's just that every other team in this that they played had a reason to play and felt like they had a reason to play. And this Tampa team didn't. It had no life to it. And I think a lot of that is based on the lack of momentum that this team got because they had no motivation or accountability under head coach Todd Bowles. And I think that that's the biggest problem with this team. And I'm going to talk about a number of other ones too, but that was the biggest. The loss of Bruce Arians and the ascension of Todd Bowles as head coach. Because what was missing, what Bruce Arians has that Todd Bowles doesn't, is that je ne sais quoi that certain head coaches have to motivate and inspire and really, get mad when it's time to get mad and, be relaxed when it's time to be relaxed. And Todd Bowles just doesn't do that. He goes from, if 1 is no personality at all and 10 is the most bombastic, like John Gruden, bombastic, or Sami Zayn bombastic, if, for the wrestling fans here, that over the top kind of zany. Todd Bowles is like a 2 at his most aggressive. And it showed in the play of the team. It showed in, and yes, they had injuries. And yeah, I will say losing Ryan Jensen that early into the season, in practice prior to that, and then missing him for all season hurts. Missing a number of offensive linemen on this team hurts. But that wasn't the only problem. Injuries happen to every single team, right? I don't accept injuries on the team as an excuse because it's really not. Because every single team has injuries. People lose their stars. Think about what happened to the Jets when Zach Wilson psychologically broke and they lost Breece Hall to an ACL injury, who was a running back who was lighting it up for the Jets. Really, the only thing that was keeping Robert Saleh's offense going was Breece Hall. And the second they lost Breece Hall and they had to rely on Zach Wilson to pass, that's when things started going wrong. And then Zach Wilson, we found out that he was a child mentally, and that pretty much ruined their season. And that's not necessarily the fault of Robert Saleh. It's just that when you lose injuries and it hurts. Yes, it happens to every team, though. I don't necessarily accept all of our starters are gone as an excuse, because there's always, in successful franchises, there's always somebody ready to step up to the plate and make themselves a star. And on Super Bowl winning teams, it's not about necessarily the one player that's catastrophic to the loss or wins of the team as far as their gameplay goes. Yes, there are key items that when you miss them, they hurt, like quarterback. Not gonna, there's no disputing that. But I don't say that injuries as a whole stop a franchise from being what the franchise was going to be from the start. And a big part of that was that a lot of the people that we got this offseason for Tampa Bay were either hurt all the time or just didn't produce. And this is another point I want to make as far as what happened, why Tampa Bay ended up 8-9. I know Jason Light, the general manager of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, did a wonderful job when the Glazers finally decided to open up their checkbook in getting Tom Brady and the entire Super Bowl winning roster of the 2020-2021 season. Everybody credited Jason Licht for basically doing what the Eagles tried to when they got Michael Vick, and trying to do what a lot of these other teams have done and assemble the super team. Everybody's tried that and failed. Jason Licht succeeded, and it was amazing, and it was historic in many ways for what that game was. I mean, there's so many reasons why that whole Super Bowl will be iconic for many reasons, including why the defense was so good. But this year, after they lost a few key positions, deciding to go with Akeem Hicks instead of Ndamukong Suh was a rough choice. Now, I understand why you would want to get rid of somebody like Suh. While as great as he is on the line, he's by and large a distraction as far as off the field stuff, or being an on the field scumbag. We've seen it in multiple teams that he's played on, and that's kind of ilk that Tampa Bay brought in too. And that was, another part of the whole Antonio Brown drama, that really, if you want to signal the beginning of the end of the franchise's success, that's where you look. Antonio Brown's meltdown on the field against the Jets in week, whatever it was, 16, 17, I don't remember, of last year. That's really where the team started to descend amongst the ranks. And I'm not really surprised that that's how it went, to tell you the God's honest truth. I do believe that started a roller coaster as far as trying to replace the things that have been broken, and they never got it. Kyle Rudolph. We got Kyle Rudolph, and I thought that was going to be a huge weapon for this offense, and Kyle Rudolph was injured for most of the year and did nothing. Julio Jones, one of the few players that, you expected maybe because he's playing with Tom Brady that he would light it up, and he was milquetoast this year and injured half the time. Akeem Hicks, the guy we brought in to take down Ndamukong Suh, he got injured and was injured half the time. And it's like, the thing is, you can't have told me, because all of these guys that we brought in, that Jason Licht brought in, all had a history of having injuries that kept them from doing anything. So when all of your offseason moves are basically drawing dead, and you strike out on 4 out of 6 of them, and then you end up losing Godwin for a few weeks, Evans was gone for a few weeks, they had no depth at wide receiver, and really that was another big part of it. Cameron Brate, who they tried to put to the level of Gronk, and I love Cameron Brate. He's my favorite offensive Buccaneer. I love Tom too, but Cameron Brate's been around Tampa Bay for a long time, and he's always contributed solid work. And he has this year, and he was one of the best targets that Tom had. Truthfully, Mike Evans was just drop city this year. I don't know what happened with them. I think the offensive scheme was off, but then you also have to look at what pieces were missing. They lost Jason Pierre-Paul because he retired, and good on him, because that was a key piece, and Gronk leaving was a key piece. And Gronk deserves retirement. He's making hella money on those USAA commercials, I'm sure. But Gronk was a piece that they never quite filled, because they tried to get Kyle Rudolph, and then Rudolph ended up hardly ever playing. And then when he did, it didn't even really matter. It didn't make a difference. The defensive line was never really able to get pressure. Shaq Barrett was hurt a lot of the year, and he was a hell of a talent. And I think that's what's the most frustrating about this with Tampa and this season, and why I think a lot of Tampa fans, at least the ones that I've talked to, are just happy this season's over, is that this team was too talented to be this bad. And that's really what it is. There's a lot of really good players on Tampa, or they were, and it made no sense that this team was as mediocre as it was. And that's the thing. And really, it started with the loss to the Steelers, that I was like, oh, maybe this team isn't good. And then we lost to the Panthers. And then we lost to the Ravens. And it was like, oh, man. And it was just week by week, it was just starting to slowly but surely feel like Tampa Bay football again. These last 2 years have been a bit surreal. I think. And Tampa Bay, a lot of Tampa Bay's felt like that. It's been surreal. Winning the Super Bowl again and making it to, having a 13-4 record, the year prior. That is stunning for us. That stuff, that doesn't happen for Tampa Bay. This year felt like Tampa Bay football, but no one could explain it. Because it didn't make sense with the amount of players on this team that were still quality, that were still able to produce. And that kind of gets to my point, is that team leaders are a crucial part of your team's success, because people will play harder for team leaders. Losing JPP lost your team leader on defense. And I don't think Lavonte David is that stalwart, and he always will be, and I'm sure that he took on that leadership role to some degree. But JPP brought a different level of discipline and energy, those intangibles, as they call them. JPP had those. And I'm not saying Lavonte David doesn't, but the defense did not play at the same level it did. And it's not just because Todd Bowles wasn't a defensive coordinator. I don't buy that as an excuse. He's got the same brain calling the defensive plays as head coach as he is just sitting on the sideline. I don't think that changes anything. I think the player that brings the defense together and makes them play harder, leaving and never being able to fill that gap, hurt the team. And a lot of that falls on the shoulders of Jason Licht. It's the offseason, and it's not necessarily his fault per se. I think you would have noticed all of these injury-prone guys when you brought them in, and then they literally all got injured, like, almost immediately. I feel like you could have known that could have happened and that was going to happen. I understand wanting to be that kind of, do what people do in Florida and do in Tampa. Make your career everywhere else, go to Florida, play the last few years of your twilight, retire, and drink. And and they tried to do that with a lot of these veteran guys who wanted to say that they still had one more shot in the chamber. And, that luck was only going to run you so far. And I feel like Jason Licht does deserve some responsibility involved in this. Because losing JPP and Gronk to retirement, you can't do anything about that. But then not being able to adequately fill the gaps in what looked like a fairly productive offseason. Tampa Bay was the second most favored sports betting at odds to win the Super Bowl at the beginning of the season. And that was why, because their offseason was by and large solid, but then we get Bruce Arians stepping down. And that's really the key to the whole thing, is losing that energy, losing that momentum. And team leaders, I said it, team leaders, that's the thing that can make or break a team. Having them or not having them. And I don't think Tampa Bay had them on any side of the ball. They didn't have it from the coaching side because Todd Bowles is lifeless and the team played lifeless. They didn't have JPP, so the defense didn't play as hard as they were before. And to be honest with you, with all of the stuff going down with Tom Brady and his divorce and the thing with Giselle and him being in the news for everything but football, including the FTX thing, him getting sued for the FTX crash that, he now had to figure his way through and, being involved in that. And Giselle probably cheating on Tom with the Tampa Bay Bucs trainer. And also, and we'll get to this in a second when I talk Tom Brady more as a whole and like what he does from here. He lost his wife to a Bucs trainer. And you think he wants to stay here? I wouldn't. If my wife, who I had been together with for some time, through thick and thin, cheated on me with a guy in the organization I was playing for, when I'm the greatest player of all time, I wouldn't want to just be loyal to that team anymore. But like, no, fuck you. You cost me my wife. You gave me a losing season, and I got embarrassed in the playoffs. Go fuck yourselves. That would be the way I'd view it if I'm Tom Brady. But back to this. But then all of those issues hurt Tom Brady's play. Having Wednesdays off, where he was just gifted Wednesdays off because he now had to, do child support and go visit his kids or whatever. That hurt. It all hurt. It all hurt. This year, it was almost like everything that could go wrong for Tampa did. The drama backstage, I say backstage, but that's the wrestler in me. That's the wrestler. We are in the Court-Martail podcast after all. But it was, the off the field drama, the lawsuit deal, the injuries, the lifelessness of the coaches, the loss of the key players that brought the team to a level of discipline they just didn't have this year. Donovan goddamn Smith having more penalties than anyone else in the league. And I've said this since 2020, and people who've talked to me about Tampa Bay in the past 3 years know this. I have been saying since 2020, cut Donovan Smith. I said it then, I say it now, I said it last year when they lost against the Rams. This guy sucks. He is no good at the position. He tightened up when Arians finally told him, fix it or you're fired. And then he did, and then he still ended up being a problem, ended up getting Tom sacked a bunch of times last year, was the biggest reason that Tom and the Bucs, I think, lost that game against the Rams. And then this year, he was just suck city all year, and he was not worth any of the money that he was being paid, has been paid. And if there's one position that needs to be changed, it is, I believe he plays left tackle. And Donovan Smith is the reason this offensive line was not good. Ryan Jensen not being there hurt, definitely. But the lack of Ryan Jensen's talent is not as damaging as the actual damage that Donovan Smith was doing on a weekly and regular basis. They mentioned it in the game of the Cowboys last night. He's the most penalized player in the NFL. More holding calls than anyone in the NFL. Has cost Tampa more yardage than anyone, not counting pass interference calls and blah, blah, blah. But as far as straight up, this is the amount of yards penalties, Donovan Smith is the champion. And at this point, he's the guy who's got to go. I'm guessing they're going to fire Leftwich. They won't fire Bowles because they're going to give him at least one more year to be mediocre. But Donovan Smith is the guy that's got to leave because he is not a good player. Hasn't been, and I don't think at this point he will be. It's time for that to stop. It's time to stop. So you look at why this team couldn't produce on offense. It's not just that Tom's play was bad this year. He was not the player he was. Tom's play was bad. There was no leader on offense to really kind of solidify everything. Evans kept dropping passes. Everyone dropped passes. The receiving core wasn't getting it done, and it's not that they're not talented. But the play calling was also terrible. They could not run the ball at all. Losing Ronald Jones. Everyone says that, Leonard Fournette is the running back of Tampa Bay, and yes, he was. I don't think he will be after this season, but yes, he was. But Ronald Jones did a lot more for this team as a running back than people give him credit for. He gave key blocks in places that Giovanni Bernard, I like the guy, but in places he couldn't. And a lot of the times he would be the difference maker. Getting rid of him and moving him to the Chiefs hurt the team. But then Leftwich never wanted to run. There were 9 running plays in the entirety of the game against the Cowboys last night at the time of recording and this week. 9 runs total. They never broke 100 yards rushing. 77 yards, I think, was the average for Tampa Bay. Tom had more pass attempts than anyone in the league because they couldn't ever run the ball. They never could establish the run. It was so one-dimensional that every other team was able to catch on to it. And no matter how good the defense played, which was sometimes they were the only thing that kept Tampa Bay in the damn game. But the problem was the offense wouldn't light it up until the last 5 minutes. And it happened 6 times all year. 6 times this Tampa Bay team would light it up in the last 8 minutes or fewer in the game, and everyone's like, well, they escaped with more wins than they actually won games, which is why when they made it to this playoff spot, nobody took them seriously, and nobody should have taken them seriously because they didn't earn it. They looked like crap all year. Tampa Bay looked like crap all year, and you could say that, yeah, they still made the playoffs, and yeah, they still had Tom Brady and blah, blah, blah. It did not matter. The Lions looked better than Tampa Bay all year. The Packers looked better than Tampa Bay all year. Pretty much everyone else except for the South looked better. I mean, the Cardinals didn't and the Rams didn't, but the Seahawks did. The Commanders did there for a brief period. I think they are kind of in the same level of ilk that Tampa is. My point is that this team didn't deserve to make it to this spot. The only reason they did is that every other team in the South was equally trash. And I love the Bucs. I've been through the 13 years from Jeff Garcia's wild card round loss to the Giants to Tom Brady winning the Super Bowl with them. I went through all of those years, right? I went through the Josh Freeman era, the Raheem Morris era, the Dirk Cutter era, the Greg Schiano era, the Lovie Smith era. That's just the coaches, the Jameis Winston years, the Josh Freeman years, the Byron Leftwich year that gave us an 0-8 start. Maybe Byron Leftwich and Tampa Bay just aren't a good mix. Just saying. And we've heard before that Bruce Arians basically said, "Oh yeah, when it comes to Tom Brady, I just let him do his thing on offense." I don't think that was the case this year. I think there was more Byron Leftwich fingerprints on Tampa Bay's offense this year, and that's why they also were not nearly as productive. But Tom wasn't the same guy as he was in years past. It was obvious. And I think it's also obvious that Tom was just done. Tom was done with this season and done with this team. He played like he just wanted to get the fuck out of there. And that's why he did just get the fuck out of there when they lost, like pretty short order when that final bell was done. They scored that touchdown in garbage time to Cameron Brate, and they nearly got one to Evans off after recovering the onside kick, and then they, when that incompletion happened, that was it. I mean, they weren't going to score 17 points in 2 minutes, just to be clear, but there was still like that little flicker of hope that Tom Brady could make the magic happen. As soon as Mike Evans missed that pass, that was it. That was the end of the game. And we knew it. And I mean, the game was over by halftime. Realistically, the game was over by halftime. But I know I'm getting a little scatterbrained here, but here's the bottom line. This season from Tampa Bay was a perfect storm of how everything you can have can look great on paper, but the second that somebody starts flicking the toothpicks from the bottom of the house, everything can come toppling down. No matter how good the roof looks, if there's no foundation to the house is bound to crumble. And that's what happened. That's what happened this year. And where do I think... I'm going to close this little mini podcast by saying, well, where do we go from here, right? Where does Tampa go from here, and where does Tom Brady go from here? I think it's pretty clear that Tom's not staying in Tampa Bay, nor should he. I think whether he retires, which I don't think is the case, or he goes to Vegas, or he goes to wherever he ends up going to, or ends up owning the Dolphins, or whatever, whatever. No matter what Tom's doing. And I don't think it's not playing anymore, because Tom wouldn't have left that game and not gone up and looked at the lights a little bit the way that Rodgers did. I think Rodgers is closer to retirement than Tom. Tom's not going to be satisfied with this season. There's no way that Tom's going to say, yeah, this 8-9, 8-10 season with Tampa Bay is how I want to leave. I don't think that's how this is going to go. But what does that mean for Tampa Bay? Because Tom leaving signifies something. It forces the league to recognize, and it's also going to make players recognize and remember that Tampa Bay is not really a destination for football players wanting to win. And that is a stigma that we have had since we started. Remember, it took 27 games for us to get a win when we started this franchise. We had a year and nearly 2 years full complete without a single win. That's how this franchise started their career. We've only made the playoffs 12 times in our almost 50-year history. The fact that 2 of those 12 times we made the Super Bowl, and the fact that we have a 100% success rate in the Super Bowl does kind of help the redeeming qualities of how the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are and feel, because even though the Saints were there 10 years longer and they have a overall better record against Tampa Bay than us, they only have 1 Super Bowl. And the Falcons have none, and the Panthers have none. So while we've still got that going for us, I'm not too worried about our position in the league, you know. But going forward, with Todd Bowles remaining at the helm, there's really no way that they're going to get rid of Todd Bowles after one season, as underwhelming as it has been. I don't see them doing that, because that just signifies that they're just ready to go to a revolving door of coaches like they were the 13 years prior to them getting Bruce Arians. I don't know, unless Bruce Arians decides, hey, I'm going to come back to coach, and they just boot Todd Bowles to the side, which is also theoretically possible, because he did say he does miss being down there, so there is a possibility that Bruce Arians might come back. But with Tom gone, I don't see them going after veterans like that anymore. I don't think Fournette stays. I don't think a lot of the players who stayed because of Tom Brady stay. I think they're going to look for different opportunities, better opportunities. I think we're going to see something of an exodus this year in Tampa Bay. I think Fournette goes, Jensen goes. I hope Donovan Smith goes, but knowing Tampa, he's going to be like the one guy they keep. Mike Evans will stay, but I think Godwin goes, because this is, I believe, he's been franchise tagged this year was how that was going, unless he did a full-blown re-sign, but I don't think he did. But a lot of the receivers can go. Mike Evans will probably stay, I hope. But I think a lot of the defense might go. Shaq Barrett might go. I hope not. Love to have him there. Devin White, who has really become the star of the defense, might go. Winfield Jr., you know, there's a lot of different players that might decide Tom Brady's not here. This coaching staff was uninspired. I think there's a better chance for us to win elsewhere. I think there's going to be a lot more people going out than there are going in. And what does that mean next year? Well, if they don't sign some sort of major quarterback or trade for Derek Carr, which is what seems to be the likeliest choice, then that leaves us Blaine Gabbert and Kyle Trask. And Blaine Gabbert, I don't think I have to say anything about Blaine Gabbert. Wonderfully nice human being. Wonderfully nice human being is not your answer for quarterback after Tom Brady. That's a fact. And if they go with Blaine Gabbert, then we're already going to know what's up. And Kyle Trask has shown me nothing to say that he is the future of this team. I've seen a few games in the preseason where he played, and he looked awful. He looked like a deer in damn headlights against preseason players. So neither of those two are going to be an option. So you're going to have to figure out some sort of leader at quarterback. Derek Carr is not a bad option. I think Derek Carr, you can get several good years out of him, and even maybe build the franchise around him. And is somebody that if Bruce Arians did come back, because he's the QB whisperer, whatever they said to him, you know, that would be something where I think he would capitalize a lot on what Derek Carr is. Which would soften the blow of Tom leaving, I think. But I think what's more realistic to happen, unless Jason Light and the Glazers decide to go balls to the wall and just blow that checkbook, but they don't. The thing is, I don't know. I mean, they can afford it. They're rich. Obviously, they can afford to do it if they want to do it. But cap space-wise, and the way that this team was structured from when they bought the Super Bowl winning team in 2020, a lot of these contracts are coming up, and they're going to have to fork out a lot of money. This team's not going to have as much flow in cap space as other teams are, because they went for win now and won now in 2020, and this is now going to be kind of the fallout action of those decisions. And that's not a bad thing, right? If they had done this win now deal and then lost, and then it never came to be and it never materialized, that would have been one thing, right? But we got the Super Bowl out of it. So this was all kind of expected, I think, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that Tampa Bay needs to move forward, and they're never going to be able to do that with Tom under center. Let's be realistic. It's like they won't, as a franchise, be able to progress and grow. And because I view in a lot of ways, this to be a metaphorical changing of the guard in the NFL, with Rodgers missing the playoffs and Tom getting embarrassed in the opening round, I think it's now symbolic of the NFL trying to push their new stars in Mahomes and Josh Allen and Joe Burrow. I think they need to move some over to the NFC, They need to get some quarterbacks in the NFC. I mean, Daniel Jones potentially, Jalen Hurts potentially, Dak. Yeah, I don't know. It depends on if maybe Brock Purdy, maybe they're trying to make a new Tom and Brock Purdy. You know, you just don't know. You just don't know what's going to happen. But you could tell that they're changing the guard. And what that means is that Tampa's probably going to suck for a while again. But at least there's a reassurance in knowing that occasionally Tampa Bay will align the stars for a Super Bowl run. Because it's happened twice now. It won't be all the time, but it won't be never either. You know, and that's the thing about Tampa, why I love this team so much and why I stuck through with it, because every so often things work out the right way and the way they should. But next year, do I think this team is going to be any good at all? No. Because this 8-9 team that we saw this year, if the magic of Tom Brady hadn't been present, is a 3-14 team. You're looking at a first-round draft pick, maybe the top seed, if or the second seed next to the Bears. You know, all it took was just a couple bad fourth quarters, and this team is where it was when they drafted Jameis Winston. And that's kind of where I suspect this team will end up come 2024, is watching. I'm imagining the Saints or the Falcons. One of these other teams have the south spot, and Tampa Bay looking in from likely the basement of the division. And, you know, and they're going to go, what, really? Division leader to the basement? I mean, well, they only won it by a game, and all of the games that Tampa Bay won were just against division opponents, really. They won 4 out of their 8 against division rivals. So that's when you do that, that's how you win. That's how you win in this league. But it was 8-9 versus 3-7-10 records. That could have gone to any one of those teams. None of those teams in the South wanted to win. It's just one had to, and Tampa Bay was the one that ended up having to win. And then, well, we all know what happened. So buckle up, Bucs fans. It's not going to get better from here. It's going to get sizably worse. And the disappointing thing about that, too, is that Tom Brady, in a large part, I think, was brought into Tampa to really boost Tampa's, the Bucs economy. You know, nobody was going to the games because everyone was sitting and drinking in the bars and nobody cared. And you look at that game against Dallas in Tampa Bay on Monday night, and it was more Boys fans than Bucs fans because the Bucs saw the writing on the wall. I guarantee you. I mean, A, because they're all in bars drinking, because that's what you do in Tampa Bay. I've done it. But it's no surprise that that was littered mostly with Cowboys fans because Tampa Bay knew what was coming. Because we've all been through this before. In the same way that the Vikings are used to sucking when it matters, which is exactly what Kirk Cousins is known for, which is why that was one of the stupidest trades in NFL history, but we'll talk about that on SJS another time. Tampa Bay, we're used to this, right? Tampa Bay Bucs are used to this feeling, this sensation. And while it is applaudable that Tom had the most pass attempts this year and he put up some great numbers, and it didn't really matter because the look of Tampa Bay was one of mediocrity at best, we're going to go back to being bad for a little while. And it's just the way that Tampa Bay is. We either get a shot in the arm and do insanely good, or we're just abysmal. And that is our identity, but that is what it is. And I'm not going to say what I've said in years past about selling the team and moving it out of Tampa Bay, because there's something special about Tampa Bay and the Buccaneers. There really is. There's something special about it because, yes, they are some of the most fickle fans in the NFL. Some of the most fickle. These are people who will go into the first quarter of a preseason game and go fire the coach. I've seen it. I've been there. I've watched it. I know the fans. The fans are the most fickle fans in the league, to the point where there was a time when I resented fellow Bucs fans. But when that team starts getting around and starts moving, the way that city comes together is truly special. It is truly remarkable, and it's something that you can't really put a description on. And no matter how bad things get with Tampa Bay, when it happens and when the magic happens, they're there for it. If you ever see the first win that Tampa Bay had against the Saints, by the way, so, but against Archie Manning and the Saints. And when Tampa Bay won that game with Leroy Selman, and I think both Selman brothers were on at that point, or at least it was the first one. Doesn't matter. One of them was on it. It changed the complexion of the franchise altogether. When that win happened, after Tampa Bay basically just like they got the team and the fans basically were like, "Hey, fuck you," and just left. But when that first win happened and the plane came down, the entire airport was flooded with people cheering and supporting, and it almost brings a tear to your eye looking at it. Just all it took was one. All it took was one win for that team and that city to come together and show love and support to Tampa Bay and to the Bucs. And the thing that I'm most looking forward to is all the Tom Brady fans to just get the fuck out of here. You weren't loyal to begin with. You're not loyal now. And I'm tired of walking with my Bucs sweatshirt up here in New England and everyone going, "Oh, Tom Brady fan, huh?" No, I was a Bucs fan before Tom Brady ever came along. I suffered before Tom Brady ever came along, and I'm going to keep wearing, and I live up in Connecticut, for those of you who don't know, and I'm going to keep wearing Bucs gear. And people are going to see that it had nothing to do with Tom Brady. That's why I was a Bucs fan. And I'm a Bucs fan for, A, because one of my very best friends is a Bucs fan and got me into it. B, because my dad lived there for 10 years and I've been to the city. But C, because say what you want about the Glazers, say what you want about who's at fault for this garbage season that still ended up in a playoff, so you can't be that mad at it. Despite Jason Light and Todd Bowles and Byron Leftwich and aging Tom and not having all those things, despite all of that, there is something special about the history of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the legacy of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the imprint that they have had on the National Football League, and something that I am very proud that in my lifetime I was able to witness the glory of. I was able to watch Tom Brady, arguably one of, because I'm not going to get into this debate, one of the greatest professional football quarterbacks of all time, join my team, have an all-star team assembled, and bring that team to a Super Bowl victory. And I got to see that in my lifetime. And then have the best regular season record Tampa Bay's ever had the year after that. Nobody is ever going to be able to take that away from me. And I'm blessed and honored that I got to be alive to see it. I got to be around to see it. And I got to be a part of that for as much as I can be as a fan. And that's something that I am very thankful for. What that means for the franchise going forward, I don't know. I don't. But I'm going to be here regardless. If we go back to sucking for 13 more years, it's not something I haven't dealt with before. I can handle it again. We got what we got, and I am and I'm not a very picky fan, right? I'm not really. The fact that I got to see it in my lifetime is really enough for me. If we can make the playoffs again before I die, that'd be great too. But there's no guarantee in any of that. So in the meantime, we'll just sit, we'll be patient, and we'll hope Vince doesn't buy the franchise. Because that would suck. But then finally, well, before I close out, and I know I've been going out and I've been talking about Tampa for about 45 minutes now, I got one final thing to say. Tom Brady, where does he go? What does he do? I respect Tom Brady. For 20 years, I hated Tom Brady because he was everywhere all at once. Every single time you thought maybe somebody was going to knock him down, boom, there he was again. And again, and again, and again, and again, and again. Nobody can take away what this man has accomplished in his NFL career. And I hated him for it. And I hated the NFL for booking it that way for as much as they did. But every time that Tom got another piece of success, More and more people wanted to bring him down. Then he came to Tampa Bay and started donating to charities. And I got to see the kind of man that Tom Brady is, and I cannot be mad at the kind of man Tom Brady is. Say what you want about him being a sore loser and throwing hissy fits on the field. That's one thing. That's somebody playing a game and gets hot in the middle of the game or gets emotional in the middle of the game. You can be mad at him for that, and there are definitely people who have been classier acts on the field. Not necessarily saying he wasn't, because he obviously is, but at this point, Tom earned my respect because of everything. Super Bowl notwithstanding, but that also helps. Where Tom goes now, I don't know. I think he still plays. I think that he plays for Vegas or a team. He plays for a team that he feels like he can win a Super Bowl with. And that means most of the pieces have to be there. And I don't think it's the Jets. It'd be hilarious if it was the Jets. I'm thinking Vegas. But wherever Tom goes, I want to see him have one last good run. So long as it's not with New Orleans, Carolina, or Atlanta, I want to see Tom have one last good run. Even if it's back with the Patriots. I don't think it will be, but even if it's back with the Patriots. Tom deserves it, but this has been a changing of the guard. So be thankful that you saw it, folks, because it's not going to last. We're looking at maybe 1 or 2 more years tops for Tom Brady. And for the moment that we had him, I cannot thank him enough for the emotional roller coaster that was felt because of him. He brought a spark to Tampa Bay that had been missing since they won the Super Bowl, realistically speaking. It wasn't even just because Gruden was gone. Gruden was really a bit player in that whole thing. But the year after, when Tampa got this, slowly but surely broke away, and when after 2003, when Tampa won the Super Bowl the first time, they had this kind of drop off, and the spark was gone. And Tom brought that spark back. And that spark's gone again, and it's going to be gone for a little while, but that doesn't mean it'll be gone forever. But I hope Tom can find his spark after everything that he went through this year. Do what's healthy for you, Tom, about the distance with your kids. If he comes back to Tampa, I'll be shocked. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but I'll be shocked. But no matter what, I respect Tom Brady. I wish him nothing but the best. I wish Tampa nothing but the best, but it might be a bumpy road going forward. But no matter what, at the end of all of this, I think the bottom line with Tampa Bay is that this season was one where it feels more relief to be over. And you saw that in Tom's face, too. I think he just couldn't wait for this season to be over. He couldn't wait to be out of that locker room, out of this lifeless heap that Tom was caught in. And then Tom really got the Tampa Bay experience. Tom finally got the experience of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tom was able to fight it off and change the narrative for 2 years, but he finally felt what it's like to be a Buc this year. And it's draining on anybody, man. But no matter what, Tom has earned whatever he decides to do. Whether it's play, whether it's retire, whether it's go do commentary for Fox. No matter what, best of luck to you, Tom. Tampa Bay, it was fun while it lasted. Will we succeed again? Eventually. But for now, I'm not too worried about it. But what I am worried about is making sure that you, the fans, who have stuck through for all of this football talk, like, share, subscribe, and hit that bell button, switch it to all, so that when we get back to the professional wrestling talk, you will be the first to know. And don't forget, with the link in the subscription, to check out Super Jam Session. We've only had a couple things air, but next year, going to be a lot more football talk with me and Skylar. There's talks about movies. There's AI stories. It's a whole mess of stuff. Josh again, Skylar, and I are bringing to you all of the non-wrestling related fun that comes from our minds. So it will be there the next time you hear it. But for those of you who joined in just for the football, thank you very much for for tuning in to the Court-Martail podcast, this special edition as we look back on what 2022 was for Tampa Bay. And here's to the future, both of the podcast, of Tom Brady and the Bucs. And we'll see you next time, folks.